Hello and welcome to a Thursday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. This is your host, Kiyan Sobhani, and joining me today to help set the stage for the Valencia Real Madrid game this weekend is David Garrido of Sky Sports. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, Kiyan. Thank you for the very correct pronunciation of my name, because my parents are Colombian and I'm delighted with that.
I said it subconsciously. I didn't even mean to say. I meant to say David, and I saw it and I said David.
No, it's okay. You roll your R's, my friend. That's good. That's how it should be. It's really funny because I remember when I first started sort of in media and I was doing stuff at the BBC. This is a long time ago, and my mum heard me talk about Barcelona or Real Madrid or it might be on TV, and she said, "Well, why don't you say Barcelona or Real Madrid or Valencia?" And I said, because I will have it ripped out of me the next time I see any of my friends. And I think sometimes it's just a little thing on pronunciation. People think it's a little pretentious if you actually have a genuine accent. People think you're putting it on. People don't even know that I'm Colombian. Yeah. It is my bloodline, man, and I'm going to represent. So thank you for that intro. Absolutely spot on.
In the past, I've tried to kind of mix the Spanish accent when I'm speaking English, and it jumbles my whole sentence. So I just try to avoid it. Like, instead of saying Real Madrid, I'll just say Real Madrid. It's easier. I won't,
We'll work on you yet, Kiyan. We'll work on you yet.
You're here. I mean, first of all, I'm really excited to just talk to you. This is pretty
good,
cool
likewise.
That you're on the show. This is awesome, and I'm really excited that you're here. And you're obviously helping us set the stage for the Valencia game. And
sure,
I guess the most obvious question that I just want to know is, well, first of all, you are a Valencia fan. Is that common knowledge? Like, publicly, people like you're kind of known for this, or do you kind of keep it under the radar?
Well, no, listen, I think when you're a broadcaster, and I'm sure you'll have spoken to a bunch of people who are commentators or presenters or whatever, sometimes you have to just be a little careful with how you bill yourself. It's not like I appear on the TV or the radio and say I'm an ex-fan or whatever and just make it blatantly obvious. You have to sort of choose your moments. I think that, people know I'm a Valencia fan from the time that I spent presenting La Liga coverage on Sky Sports. And actually, I think it's kind of healthy. I don't think we should be too straight, too utterly impartial. Look, if we've got to do some journalism, we've got some interviews, there's time and a place for that kind of thing. And that's obviously your default mode. But, people want to know who you support, and it adds a little bit of extra character and personality. And listen, I think it's excellent because then, you really have an emotional investment in what you're doing as well. That's what football's about, right? It's about, you buying in and you going through the whole gamut of emotions. But obviously when I'm actually presenting La Liga, it's not the first thing that I say. Hi, I'm Dave Garrido. You might know me as a Valencia supporter. Not exactly
with your Valencia scarf on.
Yeah, exactly. No, ban on colours in the office, actually. So you can't even wear them, even if you're just working behind the scenes. So, yeah.
Congratulations on your big Copa win yesterday. Must be nice. I don't know what that feels like.
I mean, do you know what? We almost suffered the same fate as you guys. Valencia didn't play well at Minsorota. And look, I think it might have some sort of impact actually on the game at Mestalla this weekend, because they've gone that extra 30 minutes. They've had, that trip to the Basque Country, and it just wasn't a brilliant week in terms of, that performance and the performance against Las Palmas. Yes, you got through, but ultimately I think, it's all relative in terms of where you've set your standards, and seeing what's gone before with Valencia. It was just a case of scraping through. You should have seen, I don't know if you saw photos of Marcelino when he was watching, or really, most of the point, not watching the penalty shootout, eyes closed. It really was like that. And afterwards, it was just kind of, okay, I can breathe now. But yeah, do you know what? It sets us up because both teams are in need of a boost. And it's at Mestalla, which I think actually could help Real Madrid, and Valencia will have it absolutely packed out. I think I read today there's only like 1,000 tickets left that will just go. So, it's going to be an absolute blockbuster, Kiyan. Make no doubt about it.
There's not at any time these two teams play, it's a gong show.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, David. So, first of all, regardless of what happens from here on, I think Valencia's season is relatively a success. Given that where they came from, they've been, to be quite frank, they've actually been unbelievable this year, like all things considered. They've been in a slump recently, but they've really been mind-blowingly good. And I don't know about you, I kind of sense some things with Valencia normalizing. Like around the time they played Espanyol, they won that game in the first half. They got completely outplayed, and I think if Piatti was a bit more efficient, that game would have gone a bit differently. And then you won against Alaves and Leganés and played poorly, I thought, and your counterattacks weren't efficient. I think teams kind of figured out if you're trying to pack the flanks and kind of try to stop Guedes and Soler, easier said than done. You can have some success, and there's been a bit of a slump. Do you think it's just things are normalizing, or do you think it's just a slump and they'll bounce back? Where do you kind of gauge this team's form? Like, how do you see it?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, ultimately this season, if you'd said to any Valencianista after the first half of the season, you'll be in the battle for second place, second, third, and that you'll have 40 points from 20 games, most of them would have just ripped your arm off, because compared to last season and indeed the season before, I think that is a huge boost, but then there has been a correction. Yeah. Look, I think the thinness of the squad was exposed. And once we, had Guedes out for a month and Soler has been injured as well, it shows that the first team is very, 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 very good. But then the players that you bring in, Andres Pereira hasn't really hit his straps properly. Now we've got issues at centre-back. Who plays alongside Garay, because Murillo's injured, Mesos suspended, and also Gabriel Paulista, what on earth were you doing? I mean, it felt like about half an hour that he was shouting at that ref. I don't know about you, but I was like, just stop talking.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
Yeah.
You've made your point. I think he gets it.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be a problem. And I think it might well get exposed again. So, listen, I think that overall, Valencia fans are going to be very happy with how this season's gone. But I think it was inevitable at some point that we'd get our momentum checked. And it's now a case, I think, of trying to reconnect with those things that were working so well. And very much like Real Madrid in some respects, it's transition that is the key for Valencia. It's the organisation in the first place off the ball, and then it's how you counter, and obviously trying to feed Gonzalo Guedes as soon as possible, and trying to get him on the ball. And I think that's going to be a real key for this game, actually. I don't know how you feel, Kiyan, but where he plays, left flank or right, would you rather play against Carvajal or would you rather play against Marcelo, who'll probably give you more space?
Yeah. Or
will Valencia think, hang on a minute, do we need to put someone on Marcelo because of his creativity and what he offers going forward? So maybe actually you're going to stick Maksimovic on that side or whatever. So I think that's going to be really interesting, actually, in terms of the play down the flanks and how both sides approach that. And if Valencia can reconnect with what they did, at the start of the season so well, then I think that they could actually nick this one. But that's a huge if, because it's been a bit of a slump, 4 defeats in 7 in the last couple of months. I
actually just got a bit of anxiety when I heard you talk about Valencia's counterattack and what you're going to do to Marcelo and all this, because one thing we know that Valencia is fantastic at is defending and swinging back on their counter, and their counters are lightning quick, and Guedes is terrifying. And one of Real Madrid's weaknesses is literally their transition defense and defending counters. And we've gotten away with it against teams like Las Palmas and Eibar. And obviously we haven't gotten away with it against 3 million other teams. And Valencia is going to be really tough in this department. What's the update on Carlos Soler? Do we have a timeline on him yet or no?
Listen, I think it's probably going to be another month.
Okay.
It's just sort of been one of those slightly recurring things. And what was nice about it when he was in the team, I mean, I have so much time for this young man. I spoke to him in the summer, actually, in August, just before the first game of the season. And he's just so down to earth. I mean, this is incredible. For a guy who's got like an 80 million euro release clause, and, when you look at his Instagram and stuff, he's just got pictures of his dogs and his family. And I love that. It's not him at some club in Valencia or, him, posing with a watch or a car. It's him
is that a dig at Benzema?
No.
But did you see Benzema's Instagram story?
Yes, I did. Yes. God, maybe it was, surreptitiously or subliminally, but I didn't intend it that way, I promise. But no, listen, I mean, look, they're completely different people at different stages of their careers, and I hope that he remains that way, that down to earth and that focused. And it's a real shame that he's picked up, this injury when he was that sort of that option either in the centre or on the right that gave balance.
Yeah.
It was a really nicely balanced midfield when you've got Kondogbia and Parejo as a really good partnership. It feels like it totally makes sense. Soler on the one side now, he's not a wide player, but he manages to understand his role so well that you can put him there.
Yeah.
And then Gonzalo Guedes on the other side. And it just totally made sense to me. I remember seeing Valencia in pre-season at Bournemouth. And I went down to the south coast of England and saw them there. It was the first time I'd seen Marcelino that close on the touchline, and he was constantly barking at the players. And it was fascinating because it was all about roles. It's not so much about person, it's about roles. I want my right midfielders to do this. I want my, number 10 to do this, my number 9 to do this. And, you could tell that some of them got it, Soler being one of them, and some of them, were square pegs and round holes and weren't able to adapt. I think that it's hopefully just a couple of weeks or a month at the most until we see him again. But do you know what? I think the interesting thing is when you have a little look at who Valencia have got in terms of other midfield options, well, I actually am quite surprised by how Maksimovic has forced his way into the side now. And he's been the right midfield option for the last few games. And it took him a while to break in. But now he's in. He's proved that. He's another young player, 22. So I think there are some other bright spots, and it's not just about that first 11. Whatever the version of Real Madrid's Gala 11 is with Valencia, it's nice to know that certainly a couple of midfielders, and then up front, plenty of options there.
Well, I mean, with Max, basically, I think the silver lining in these things, not that there's ever a silver lining in losing a great player like Carlos Soler, but if there ever was one, it's things like you would have never seen Maksimovic kind of slide in and now you have an extra player to you can depend on because he's been playing well. It's kind of the same with Vermaelen and Barca. Out of necessity, he was playing, and I'm like, oh, we actually have a good player on our hands and someone who can help us with our depth.
Do you know what? I never thought that he was a bad player, but you know what it's like, Kiyan, and I'm sure you speak to lots of Madridistas. Some of them are your Patreons, some of them patrons. Some of them are friends of yours. I mean, they're Patreons as well. You get all sorts of different attitudes towards. Let's say, circumspection. So, I reckon I'm relatively circumspect and tolerant as a fan. So I'm not going to write someone off just straight away after sort of 5 games. But you do get the extremes, don't you? And, some people just wrote off Thomas Vermaelen, but the dude's been injured for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Give him a chance. And he came in when they most needed him. I mean, Samuel Umtiti has been brilliant for Barcelona. Probably the only signing of last summer. Of the sort of before the 2016-17 season that actually kind of worked.
Yeah.
And without him and with Piqué, dropped in and out a little bit around that time, you absolutely needed someone to come in and step up and prove that they could, match up to that. And he did that. I'm not surprised. But what I'm surprised about is by how many people are surprised. Does that make sense? I don't want to be too sort of complicated there. But, I think that he was a bit too maligned before.
Well, I think there are unknowns with these things. I think I think an example is Diego Costa. Every single person knows he's a brilliant player. But there was I think the unknown with him was how was he going to react coming out of 6 months of just not playing? Is he going to be fit? Turns out there was still the assumption because he just slid in like as if nothing happened and he was scoring goals right away.
Yeah, and getting sent off right away. I mean, that was brilliant. I was that game at the Wanderers. So I went there early Jan and just grabbed. So it was on Dave Reyes happening in Spain, and it was really kind of cold and wet, and I just thought, you know what, this is all set up for Diego. There's something in the air here. That he'd made his debut in the Copa, a second debut, I suppose, and then I was thinking, this is perfect. It's a day of celebration in Spain. Atletico are at home. He's playing at the new stadium. He's back in front of home fans, and it is a horrible rainy day. And I've got a feeling that something's going to happen. And then it did all in the space of 6 minutes, and that was just brilliant. In fact, I didn't even. Do you know what, Kiyan? I didn't even realise that he got sent off. I thought he was injured. I thought he was wandering off, and then I realised that he'd obviously been booked a second time for going into the crowd, and I was like, oh right. Oh my God! So it is perfectly scripted. Then he's absolutely followed the script. So, but you're right. People's knowledge of that kind of player are very different because I suppose he gets more headlines. He's more widely covered. He played in the Premier League for a while. So I think you're right. I think it's down to people and their own knowledge, and therefore they think their own expectations are.
You mentioned briefly the training with Marcelino barking at players, and some people got it, some people didn't get it. The players who didn't get it, are they still with the team or no?
Let me have a think. No. I think actually, well, no. To be fair, some of them just don't feature that much. So the likes of Nacho Gil, who's now just gone on loan to Las Palmas, Orellana, who, to be fair, was just a bit of a
nutcase.
Problem. I mean, listen, he is. That's right. That's actually the perfect word. But he's clearly got something. He's got talent, but the boy sometimes doesn't do himself any favours.
Yeah.
Now look, now he's in the Basque Country and at a club where he can actually probably be the star or one of the stars and really kind of drive that team. But it just, someone like Marcelino is so attentive to detail and demands so much from his players, which is why maybe after a couple of years they're sort of washed out a little bit. It's so intense. Yeah. It's kind of what happened at Villarreal, really.
Yeah.
But it's what Valencia needed. And when there was discussion over who would be the new boss in place of Voro, there was Quique Setién and him being talked about a lot. And I just thought, listen, as much as I love Quique Setién and what he's done, with Las Palmas, what he's done at Betis, I just don't think that really fits in terms of what we need, what Valencia need in our current situation. Marcelino is. Yes, he's a bit of a disciplinarian, but people, when you buy in and when they understand this strategy, and the vast majority of them have, then that is what puts you third in the table with 40 points from 20 games. But it was fascinating. When you see them moving off the ball, it was it's like a unit. It was this almost not completely perfectly like clockwork, but this unit that was moving in perfect synchronicity of two banks of four, and then Rodrigo and who was it? It wasn't Zaza. I don't think Zaza was playing in that game, but playing one off the other. Rodrigo was running all over the place, and by the way, for him, what a season he's been having compared to what happened last season. Most people thought, Rodrigo, man, I don't really rate him, don't really care.
Yeah,
but now look,
and all this, and he looks great. Yeah.
He looks good, doesn't he?
He looks fantastic. I think that point about Marcelino's discipline is really interesting. That's why I kind of asked to revisit it, because you look at the players that he let go this summer, and one of them was Orellana, which you mentioned. Another one, who's out on loan was Cancelo. And to me, those are two players who have a lot of offensive flair, who can create. And I was thinking, who's going to replace that flair? But, this is exactly why I'm not a football coach. Is Marcelino knows who buys in, who doesn't, which characters he wants, which personalities he wants. And you can have all the talent in the world. If you're not going to buy into the system, there's no place for you. And who would argue? Look at them. Like, they're flying. I mean, players like Zaza and Rodrigo, just unbelievable. And you go down the list. They've been fantastic.
And even Santi Mina, who's not, absolute first choice. And whenever he comes on, I mean, I don't know his goals per minute or minutes per goal, but I'd like to find out. I must be up there because, a lot of his, he came on against Alaves in the Copa quarterfinal second leg and scored with his first touch. And, suddenly it was, Valencia heading towards the semi-finals. And then, of course, it went to extra time penalties. But even he, who I think a lot of people say, well, he's clearly got talent, but has he got the mentality? Well, actually, he's shown this year that he has, and he's content in the system, not always to be starting. Whereas maybe Santi of last season or the season before might have just been complaining or lax or whatever. He's sort of known as not necessarily being the best trainer or training player of the lot. And you talk about Joao Cancelo. It's an interesting one because when he played under Prandelli or played under Voro, he played mainly as either a right back or sort of the right side of a 3 and a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
And actually, he's for me a winger. And when he did play against Bournemouth and he played on that right hand side, he was one of the best players that day. Now, I don't know if he was sensing that things were changing and he felt like he was playing for his future. You can tell by his emotional reaction when he was playing his final game for Valencia before then going to Italy. He was, I think it all kind of came to him at once at that moment.
Yeah,
and he was in
that's
tears.
right, I remember. Yeah,
do you remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so, I mean, listen, but I think he is clearly a talented player. Maybe he can still be worked on. Maybe he can still be nurtured. I think it's a lot to do with the guidance of the coach in that respect. And it could be that this time away, it could be the best thing that ever happened to him, this time away. And if he were to come back, maybe he would have a renewed attitude be refreshed, etc. But it sounds like his time at Mestalla may well be done, and most people don't really miss him because of Grealish. Yeah. So it's a harsh way to compare, but the guy is lightning. He is so rapid. It's scary. Yeah. It's frightening, and that's why I think where he plays and who he attacks on the flanks is going to be really interesting at Mestalla on Saturday.
I want to throw some questions at your way.
Go for it. Let's do it.
So we have last night. Late last night. We finished recording our Managing Madrid podcast post game show against Leganés. It was a post mortem. It was depressing, and so late at night, put out
quite literally post mortem, right?
Yeah. It was.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Listen, you've been through your fair share of struggles in the past 5 to 6 years.
This is
so
true.
You're allowed.
Yeah.
I have 2 Champions Leagues in the past 2 years. I'm fine. I'll be okay.
you got some credit in the bank there, Kiyan.
Yeah. So I put out a call to our patrons. I said, look, we're recording a podcast with David Garrido, and almost immediately just got flooded with questions. So here we go. First question is from Sajid Riaz. And by the way, if you guys are listening, you want to join our Patreon page, you want to get prioritized for your questions, patreon.com/managingmadrid. You can pledge there and support the show. So Sajid says, hi, David. Just want to know, why do Valencia transform into the 1970s Brazil team every time they face Real Madrid? It happens every single time, even when you guys are having the most disastrous season. In fact, the last time I properly remember thrashing Valencia was 15 years ago, in the 4-1 victory way back in 2002-2003, where Zidane produced that masterclass. Since then, it's either been losses, draws, or narrow victories for us. What's with all the hate, brother? Let us catch a break for once. Laugh out loud.
Wow.
Can you explain it?
I mean, Sajid, listen, don't hold back. Say what you really think. Say what you really think. No, well, listen, do you know what? This is historic. There have been times when the rivalry's been quite bitter. I mean, interestingly, because I've been very fortunate presenting Smash Football last season.
Yeah.
I met Gaizka Mendieta. Well, I met Gaizka before, but meeting him on a regular basis, getting to chat to him, and he's just an insanely nice, very cool dude. He just is. He's just one of those people who's, he is, and it's true on and off camera. There's no kind of pretense there. There's no show. It's just how he is. And we did the Valencia Real Madrid game, and I can't remember which stadium it was at last season, but I remember we discussed it and about transfers at the time. And in fact, actually, when he was just before he went to Lazio, he was heavily linked with Real Madrid, and in fact told me that he'd done the photos. They'd done the photos with him with the scarf, with him with the shirt, etc. But the sort of asking price that Valencia put was prohibitively high, even at that stage. I mean, we know about release clauses and PSG paying extra, whatever for Neymar. But at that point, in that context at the time, 60 million euros was an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
And that was what Valencia said, well, look, Real Madrid, if you want him, you're going to have to pay this. And they didn't let him go. And I think he wanted to go. And in the end, he went to Lazio and then eventually came back and went to Barcelona. So that was kind of part of it. There was other transfer narratives that were really fueling this rivalry. And it's really quite an interesting one. It's quite a sort of bitter one. Most people don't really think about it because they think about, obviously the Clásico rivalry, but for Valencia, they think about Levante, they think about maybe Villarreal. But actually, Valencia Real Madrid, because also the fact that there's been so many titanic encounters then fuels that rivalry even more, which means that the next encounter becomes even more titanic. So it's kind of almost self-fulfilling, really. But I think Valencia just seem to love raising their game. They love that big occasion. It doesn't matter if they're 15th in the table or whatever like they were last season. And, of course, that game that they played at Mestalla and, going 2-0 up so early and the Zaza goal on the volley on the turn and all that kind of stuff, it is absolutely the epitome. And it just seems to happen time after time. And Parejo, I think, is another interesting player in this particular context because, well, the free kick that he scored, that was at Bernabeu, I think, last season, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Before?
Yeah.
No, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And he has sort of, gone up and down, and he tried to leave the club the summer before, and Sevilla were in for him, and then he comes in and, with Marcelino, and, he's made him like his real kind of focal point and talisman once again. With Kondogbia, it's a perfect partnership, and again, he's sort of gone on the up. And he particularly likes this encounter, and so there's all sorts of different elements to this. It's just one of those little rivalries that when you get into Spanish football, you know, you realise actually there's so much fire there, real natural fire. And that's why we love it. It's goals guaranteed. Goals absolutely guaranteed in this one. That's probably famous last words. And, you know, you're going to give me hell on Twitter when it's 0-0. But I just can't see it being that way. Just can't.
The Mendieta thing, it was 2001. So what, 16 years ago, which is crazy. That, to me, it still leaves a sour taste in my mouth, the fact that the way he left Valencia. Because just as a pure Spanish football fan, him leaving, both for Spanish football and for him, it was one of the worst things he ever did. Because he went to Lazio and he just fell off and he was forgotten and he didn't last there. On the flip side, I remember tracking the transfer at the time as a Real Madrid fan, and we were all thinking, where is this guy going to play? Unbelievable player. We had Figo, we had Zidane, we had McManaman, all playing at a high level. And it just seemed like so forced to bring him in. If he had just stayed at Valencia, it would have just rewritten history in such a better way, I find.
Yeah, look, I mean, do you know what? I mean, being able to say these things in retrospect, in hindsight, it is obviously easier. But I do take your point. I think he obviously at Lazio, he was ultimately their player for 3 seasons, but he spent most of it on loan at Barcelona.
That's right.
Middlesbrough, and that's why, obviously, in terms of a British viewing public on Gaizka, you know, that's why he's so loved, is that, you know, he, in a very short space of time and in not that many games, actually made quite an impact at Borough. But it felt like he'd sort of, at that point, 2001, remember the very recent history at that point of Valencia reaching the 2 Champions League finals, losing them both. This is before they then won the league, and then, of course, under Benitez, League and UEFA Cup double. So he wasn't there for that. But I think maybe at this point, he spent 8 years at Valencia, and I think he felt he needed that next step to truly become a great of European football. And you know, where better to do that than Real Madrid? You know, the team who are most associated with that trophy that he came so close to winning twice, but didn't quite. And then I think the rivalry then prevented that from going through. Real Madrid were prepared to pay up to a point, but then Valencia just put it out of their reach, even for Real Madrid at that point.
Well, and even Lazio was a powerhouse at that time. So, you know, it wasn't, at the time, it's not like it was a bad idea. Like it was,
Yeah. Sometimes things just don't work out. And, you know, I think, I don't know whether in terms of the football at that time in Italy, whether it suited him and the style of play that he had. I mean, you know, what I loved about him is he wasn't just the vision, the passing, but the leadership. I mean, you know, he's not the sort of person who's going to bark at people. He's not going to shout orders. He's not going to be that vocal. But he led because of just how good he was. Just he was truly leading by example. And that's what I loved about him. He was just a kind of quite unassuming guy who just let his talent shine and do the talking. And people, I think, sometimes forget about that. You know, they remember the sort of, maybe some of the goals, or, you know, maybe some of those beautiful passes and that vision, that incisiveness. But, you know, for me, when I think about him, this is when he's one of those players that you, a little bit like a Modric now, he can effortlessly control a game. You know, he can just do it, really be one step ahead of everyone else, and everyone is playing to his tempo. And I think, you know, that's when Modric is right at the top of his game, and again, coming back to Saturday, this could be key. When he's at the top of his game and he just dictates the tempo, that's such a key part of this. The momentum and tempo is going to be really, really interesting for this. But if Modric can do that, then I think Real Madrid are favourites.
And back to this point about Valencia morphing into these super beings against Real Madrid. And so in the past 12 La Liga games, Real Madrid has won 4. The interesting thing about it is that Valencia have actually only won 2 of those, and the rest have just been draws, and like high scoring draws, like you mentioned, like then, and most of them just 2-2s.
Yeah. In doubt, but 5 are on 2-2.
Yeah. The next question is from Christopher McCormick, one of our patrons. He says, "How big an impact are the suspensions going to have on this game? You're missing 3 defenders." 2 suspensions, 1 injury. So your Murillo was injured, which is a big loss, and Ruben Vesso and Gabriel Palista both are suspended. They both got red cards. Although Garay is back.
Yeah, mindless.
Yeah, so you were talking about Palista earlier about his decision to just go crazy.
Yeah, Gabriel, well, obviously Marcelino knows him from his time at Villarreal, and it was interesting because I look at the Valencia team, and one I think the key things is partnerships. So it talks a little bit about Kondogbia and Parejo, but also the partnership that you could have in that centre-back sort of duo, and it was generally tends to be Garay plus one, either Murillo or Gabriel. And obviously with Murillo out injured for a considerable period of time, it was Gabriel and Garay. Now, I think this was the area that was the weakest, and this is immediately where Marcelino strengthened. When I went to Las Palmas, the game against Las Palmas to kick for the season, on that very day was when they announced both. And they revealed them both. And I think it was, and Peter Lim was there as well. It was quite strategized, as these things often are, to kind of really give that boost at the start of the season. And of course, Valencia won the game, and, off we go. But now, those two players that have been brought in this summer, Murillo and Gabriel, now both out, what do you do? Now, my thought is that it would probably be Francis Coquelin, who has played at centre-back a bit, but that's not his natural position, who would play alongside Garay. I don't think he'll go to a 3. It doesn't really make sense. They haven't really played him in 3 unless, against Las Palmas when they were reduced to 10 men and then 9.
Right.
And because otherwise you then disrupt the midfield. Because if you put Coquelin in the midfield and you put Kondogbia as a centre-back, which is also possible, then I think, that messes up more than it needs to. So I think Coquelin is the one that moves back, and you keep Parejo and Kondogbia, in that midfield axis. So that's how I think, if I were Marcelino, that's how I would try and set Valencia up. But you're right. I mean, it's a good point, and it is very significant that it's happened just now ahead of this game, and it's something that Real Madrid, I'm sure, will be targeting. Absolutely sure of it.
I completely forgot to talk about Coquelin, actually. And a lot of these players, it goes without saying that I'm not even sure we need to talk about, Kondogbia, just been unbelievable. And but I'm curious to know about Coquelin and what your thoughts are on him, because the signing kind of came out of the blue, it seemed. But a lot of people were criticizing it, and I was like, you know what? It's a nice depth piece, as is proving now. And he's probably he was a bit underrated at Arsenal, I found. And a lot of Arsenal fans were sad to see him go a bit. But what is your evaluation of this whole thing? And how is he doing so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's doing fine. I think, he was at Arsenal for a very long time.
Yeah.
He was there for pretty much a decade, but you just wouldn't know. He didn't really do a huge amount. He played, what was it, about 160 odd games, 180, 160 odd, something like that. And, that is obviously not that many per season. There was a time when he started really kind of imposing himself, and he went on a few loan spells, went to France, I think. He's one of those that I think is relatively dependable. But it was a bit of a surprise. And a lot of people are making a lot of the fee. This guy doesn't play regularly for Arsenal. He's been there for so long. He's no spring chicken. I mean, he's not like he's super old. He's 26, but at the same time, 11 million pounds, or that kind of thing. I think that it's a squad signing. It's not someone who is going to be playing in that first team. When everyone's fit, when everyone's in form and ready to go, he's on the bench at best. But listen, I think that he's someone who can come in and, as we say, do a job. I don't think he's going to pull up any trees doing it. But if he can be tidy, redoubtable, make sure that he doesn't make any big mistakes, just do the simple things well, then I think and work, because that's what Marcelino wants. Then I think that's all you can really ask of him. He's not the sort of player that's going to have huge amounts of talent. He's not going to have high scores on FIFA 18. But you know what? That's not what we signed him for. And obviously that kind of player doesn't come for 11 million. So listen, I'm not displeased with it. I don't think it's a bad signing, but equally it's not one that totally excites me. But when you think about Murillo and when you think about Gabriel, I thought, they're okay. I didn't think, wow, these are, top level footballers. And Gabriel had not really done much in his time at Arsenal to suggest that had improved. But now, apart from what happened at Las Palmas, I think he's made his worth really quite evident. So, maybe Coquelin, maybe Marcelino seen something there in Coquelin that he can develop that really wasn't given the airtime at Arsenal. because he couldn't find a first-team place regularly enough.
Our patron, Ivan Garcia, says, if there's... what is the status of Valencia's new stadium? Mestalla will be missed, by the way.
Okay. Where do we start with this? Well, I mean, look, they gave an update. When was it? I think it was in like the autumn, didn't they? And it is basically one of the things that confuses me about this is what's already been done, and is it still valid? Is it still safe? I mean, sadly, in the construction of the new stadium, while it was ongoing, sort of in the late noughties, it caused the death of 4 people, and. Obviously all the money problems in Spain and with not just the economy, but obviously Valencia and their debts, which really not only put the brakes on it, but put it severely in doubt. And I think have you actually seen the site itself, Kiyan? It's quite eerie. You kind of get there's a hotel sort of across the road from it, and you can sort of go up there and you can just sort of look from like the 20th floor or whatever, and look down on and it's got it feels like the real feeling of what could have been. And what's happening now is that it's not by any means a priority for the club, but they have tried to sort of scale down to try and complete it. But we've got our centenary next year. Won't be time for that. And it will be from, I think it was originally going to be about 80,000 to now about just over 60,000. And the design is really quite simple. I think before it looked like, wow. It'd been like re-skinned. It had lots of nice little local Valencian community touches to it. You can forget that. I think it's going to be a lot more kind of straightforward, but still a big stadium. Compared to the Mestalla right now, it will be an increased capacity, but not as big as what they had hoped. I think it's clear that for Peter Lim, it was never a priority. Absolutely never a priority. If the club changes hands, which has been talked about, by the way, it's not like it's off the table. There have been talks with other potential owners in the future. That may change things, but for now,
yeah. The background of this, the project started before the Lim era, obviously.
Yes.
And what was the reason they just stopped working on it if they had started already?
Oh, because of the debts that accumulated with Valencia to their creditors, Bankia, and then of course also we had the crises in Spain, both in terms of the economy generally, but also construction and housing and things like that. So it was this horrendous storm of things that all came together at the same time. And remember as well that in order to continue the construction, Valencia had sort of banked on being in the Champions League every season, which of course then stopped happening. They kind of sort of said, oh, well, yeah, that's 35 million. We're going to get that. But then, of course, they didn't. So, Valencia, whether they want to admit it or not, did not handle that well at all. And it's one of those little blots, really. And I think hopefully the new stadium will be almost like symbolically a sort of a new beginning that way. But at least the changes that have been made since the summer, in terms of coach, in terms of sporting direction, have been positive. And that's where it starts. It has to start there, and then everything else hopefully follows. Look, I remember seeing it. I remember looking down. I can still see like odd bits of, like these metal poles and these big sort of slates of things, and just looking there, just feeling quite depressed about the whole thing, because you kind of look and just go, oh, look, this could have been amazing. But it was, as I say, that sort of that those circumstances all conspiring, and then Valencia themselves not doing the job on the pitch.
This next question will shift us to Real Madrid a bit. So, another patron question from Risto. He says, so, David, from Capello to Mourinho and Carlo and Zidane, and then there was the Benitez's of the world. What is Real Madrid's identity? What does the club and team stand for? The founding principles? Leave history aside right now. What is the identity?
Wow, things have got deep all of a sudden, haven't they?
Yeah, it got a bit. I don't know. This is a question that a lot of people struggle with because we're unsure what the identity is at the current moment. We kind of knew what it was last season. It was a bit it was a bit clear. It was direct. They there was a lot of movement and off-ball movement from 4 central midfielders and Isco doing a lot of work, providing outlets. And this year, it's kind of just a mishmash of tactical madness and chaos.
I agree with that. I think, when I think of what you wrote in your piece on Managing Madrid on the immediate reaction to the Leganés defeat in the Copa, I just kind of think that in itself tells its own story. And I think to do with identity, I think it's not just to do with tactical things, it's to do with desire. And one of the things that Real Madrid have always had is desire and this inevitability. If you're synonymous with the word remontada, a comeback, then that shows desire. I feel that when you were painting the picture of Marco Asensio, having been fed by Isco, and then you're looking up and you're there going, hang on, how do I get through this? There's just all these bodies in the way. It's because Leganés wanted it more. Now, this is a team who have far smaller budget, far fewer resources. However, what they have is a manager or a coach who is incredibly good at getting his ideas across and making sure that all of those players, the sort of, motley crew that they are at Leganés, absolutely deliver that with the desire. So I think that's the thing that's really lacking at Real Madrid right now. If you go back to the start of the 2016-17 season, no major signings apart from the return of Morata. And then, you have this team that set out to win La Liga. That was clearly the priority. And they said, right, well, let's just go and do it. And our talent will get us there. And you're right, the kind of, tactically, it made a lot of sense with the pace and the movement. But also tactically in terms of team selection and towards the end of the season when, they just had to make sure they kept their noses in front. And, the use of the supposed B team. Well, the thing is that all made sense because that B team, those players, your Moratas, your Jameses, your Iscos, your Lucas Vázquezes, when they came in, they completely understood. They had the hunger, they had the desire, they wanted to prove themselves. They all played their part. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm Colombian and born of Colombian parentage, but for James, don't forget, he scored that goal that almost ended the title race early. The 2-2 at the Bernabeu. That goal when Real Madrid were down to 10 men, and then that beautiful run, curling around into that near post. And then it made me think, you know what? This shows what Real Madrid are this year. They are that team that every single person, to a man, wants to prove their worth. Now, you go into the start of this season, maybe the 2 Supercopa wins were the worst thing that could have happened because what I think that led to was complacency. And there wasn't the desire. You've already won 2 Champions League back-to-back, the first team to ever do it. You've got La Liga for the first time in 5 years. And nothing has really changed that much. And the B team now, if there is a B team, isn't being trusted. And do you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of Barcelona under Luis Enrique. When Luis Enrique had his Gala 11 and he had the options on the bench, he never used them, never wanted to. And I feel now, ironically, that Real Madrid has sort of turned into that because, I haven't seen enough of Ceballos. I personally think that he's a player who could really be an absolute world superstar if he has the right application and he's guided in the right way. Llorente, I wasn't particularly impressed by the performance against Leganés. I thought it was disjointed. But, what he did at Alaves was maybe extraordinary by their terms in a team managed by Mauricio Pellegrino. So maybe that fitted him at that stage in his career for him to shine like that. But then you come back to the Bernabeu and you're trying to unseat Casemiro and you can't. So I kind of feel that, ironically, there are echoes here with your greatest rivals. When Barcelona made the signings before the start of last season, we talked about it before. Samuel Umtiti is the only one that really worked. You had Luka Digne, you had Andre Gomez, you had Paco Alcácer, you had Silerson, you had Denis Suarez coming back. But, they made all this change. Everyone, that makes sense. Yeah, young 20-somethings, hungry. And now look, this time around, it's Real Madrid who signed the younger players. Plus you've got Vallejo coming back, Mayoral, etc. And yet the freshness doesn't appear to be there. It's not being trusted. And the established stars, maybe there is that complacency that they're not really going to, if they're all fit, they play because that's what Zidane does. He's sort of stubborn in that way. So listen, I've kind of rambled on a fair bit there, but I think you kind of get what I'm aiming at. Really, it's this slight staidness and not the hunger, not the desire that was shown last season, and where everyone, no matter what their place in the pecking order, really displayed.
My my I struggle dealing with the expectation that people have of this current B team, the quote unquote B team, because they call for these players to play more. Everyone's yelling at Zidane to play Ceballos. Where's Ceballos? Marcos Llorente provide good minutes. Marcelo can't defend. Bring on Teo. And then they just don't play. And then they play these Copa games with a lack of familiarity, a bit cold. They have no match rhythm, and then they struggle. And then everyone says, "Why are you playing these kids? It's a disaster." And it's almost like there's no sense of development. That idea is like thrown out the window. And look, I remember the struggles that players like Marcelo, Ramos, even Ronaldo, all of so many young players, they went through Real Madrid and they became legends. And I remember very clearly the amount of the short leash we had players like with Marcelo and Ramos. And and, you know, David, you and I watched La Liga both. We saw what Ceballos did with Betis. We saw what Marcos Llorente and Teo did with Alaves. And I think if these players were still out there with their respective teams in La Liga, we'd be crying for them still to oh, my God, please sign these kids. They're amazing. We need to make sure that Barca doesn't get them. And then we get them. And then there's this outcry of, why are you playing these guys in the Copa game? And that's the thing. The thing is, I don't like placing blame on a coach who won back-to-back Champions League titles and generally is a legend. And if you ask me, I think he has earned the right to steady the ship and just try to figure it out somehow. But I agree. But I also think it's just crazy to blame these kids for being thrown into a tactical fire. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think. Listen, when Real Madrid were getting those results, often, you know, going 2 goals down against Villarreal, whatever it might be, and you just had this sense of inevitability that they would just get. You know, I have a friend. It's really funny. We meet in the Sky Gym every so often, and he said,
"You guys have
Do you know
a
what
gym?
I've been doing this season?
Oh my God, we need. What am I doing with my life?
You're always welcome. I'll take you around the gym. There's some studios, by the way, as well, some TV studios. But no, I'll take you around the gym as well. It was really interesting. So he watches La Liga. I didn't know, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Do you know what I do? I've noticed that Real Madrid go behind a fair bit. As soon as I do that, I lump on to them to win. I lump on a bet. So as soon as they're 1-0 down to that, I just pile it all on Real Madrid because the odds are obviously better than if you've done it at the start of the game when it's 0-0.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, this is happening a lot, but there was an inevitability. It's part of their aura, part of the way that they are. But the thing was that, you know, yes, there was a bit more tactical identity, if you like, in terms of the style of play. But this season there really isn't. And in that sense, with developing players, what are they supposed to be learning? I think, you know, to a certain extent, you know, people talk about Zidane, is he a good coach, is he not a good coach? Well, for last season, it was perfect. Most decisions he got right. There were a few that maybe went slightly wayward, taking Ronaldo off against, I think it was Las Palmas away, was that right? And it was the 2-2.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, a couple of it, but listen, look, no one gets everything right. We all make mistakes. And you know what you should do is just man up and admit it, and then you just crack on and try and do a good job and learn from it. But most of the things, you know, in terms of team selections, you know, those trips to Depor and Granada, not great teams admittedly, but that's when you play those players. That all worked out, and that didn't carry the Champions League campaign along with it. And then you had just the sheer talent of Ronaldo to push you through that relentlessly. But this season, the young players, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just there. Go, what is it that we're doing? What is the style? I mean, you know, it comes back to the question: what is the identity? And when you're young and you need that guidance, that's when you need a coach to come in and say, right, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is the style, and this is how I want you to play within it. Which is why I'm saying about Llorente that when he was at Alaves, you know, most ball recoveries for a midfielder in the entire season, the entirety of La Liga, with Mauricio Pellegrino, who a lot of people have said, and when the appointment was made, it's a smart appointment by Southampton to get this guy, and look what he's achieved with Alaves with meager resources, etc. It hasn't quite worked out, but it's a very, very different, as you know, very different beast, very different creature playing and managing in English football. But with Llorente there as a really central, pivotal figure, and the way that they like to play at Alaves under Pellegrino, it made sense. And for him and his development, that's what then made people say, oh, well, Real Madrid, you've got to get him back and get Teo while you're at it. and come to some agreement with Atletico, and we'll just do it. It's fine. But you see, the thing is that his context, his situation, his landscape has changed. And that's why maybe he's, that performance against Leganés really proved it. Just balls going nowhere, maybe sometimes trying a bit too hard. But, the one that I think really could be special, like I say, is Ceballos. I spoke to Victor Sanchez del Amo, former Real Madrid player, La Liga winner, Champions League winner. Mm-hmm. And he obviously coached him at Betis as well. And, he said, because before Gaspoya had basically almost ruined the guy, hadn't done much with him. Then in comes Victor, steadies the ship, gets Betis safe, and gives Ceballos the freedom that he deserves. And when you do, he's the sort of player that I think can take the game by the scruff of the neck. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see him being given a similar freedom. Question is, who then makes the way? Who's the one who steps aside? I sometimes think actually that you don't necessarily need Casemiro playing in every single game. Let's just try and take the handbrake off a little bit. Let's let Dani play and see what happens. Because I think you endow him with that confidence and that belief, then I think you could really have a star on your hands. But if you don't give them the space to breathe, then this is such a crucial age, such a formative stage of their careers. And I think he needs to believe a little bit more in what he's got there, because there's no doubt they're talented players, but they need someone to kind of say, hey, look, I do really think you're that good, and I'm going to give you this chance. And it's not just in the Copa last 32 first leg against no sé qué. So I think that there's still some life there. There's still some things that can be nurtured and improved. I'm with you
100% on that, on everything you just said. David, I think I've abused your time enough, and I really, really appreciate you coming on. And
not at all, my pleasure.
Maybe before we wrap it up, do you have a prediction for this weekend?
Well, you see, on the Revista Predictor, of which I'm sure you're aware, and
yes.
I didn't ask you to ask me that question, to plug this, but it is something that I do with Sky Sports. It's this little digital thing that we do on the website and on Twitter. We choose 3 games, and you choose the final score and first goal scorer. So it's myself, it's some of the commentators, Rob Palmer, John Driscoll, Kevin Keatings. You're aware of their work, I'm sure, and David Phillips, who's a summariser, co-commentator. And I think, actually, do you know what? Let me just quickly check. What has everyone done? I'm going to give you some breaking news here. This isn't meant to be out until Friday morning, but I'm going to give you the exclusive on this.
Oh, wow.
What have I gone for? I've gone for 1-1. With Bale opening the scoring. Okay. Rob Palmer reckons that you are going to absolutely destroy us. 3-0 Benzema first goal scorer. I know, but the thing that Rob goes rogue, though. That's what Rob likes to do.
It's a gamble.
For Villarreal, Real Sociedad, he's gone 3-4. I mean, I'm thinking, what are you on? What have you had for dinner? I have no idea what you're saying there. John Driscoll, Kevin Keating's both gone for 2-2. As we said, if in doubt, back the 2-2. And also David Phillips has gone 2-1 Real Madrid. With 3 of us have gone for Bale first. Kevin, who's leading at the moment, has gone for Santi Mina to score first, which I think is actually quite smart, because Santi only played last 30 minutes of normal time and then the extra time at Alaves, so he might be that bit fresher. He's obviously in confident mood. I know you don't like his celebration, but you may well be seeing it at Mestalla if Kevin Keating is right.
You know that. I was wondering if I had to mention it, or you've already heard me say that, so I didn't.
No. Yeah. It belongs to someone else, man. You got to at least give him a kind of credit. You got if you're going to take an NBA superstar's celebration, you got to at least kind of name check him, or at least add in his Twitter handle or something. I don't know, but listen, I think it's going to be goals. It's going to be goals, and I'm going to stick with what I put on the predictor, 1-1. But look, if you tear into our central defence, maybe Rob Palmer's right. Maybe it's 3-0. I don't know, but it's going to be entertaining. Absolutely.
Where can people find you and connect with you? On Twitter is the best way, or?
I think so. Okay. That's the best one for me. So it's at Sky Sports David. Listen, one of the things that I think is great, and we've talked about this off air, Kiyan, before, that there's a real vibrant, engaged community in Spanish football, no matter what your role is. You can be a broadcaster, you can be a journalist, you can be even a player, you can be a fan, and I think there's a really good sort of level of conversation there, which is just really fun. So just come and chat. I'm always up for chat. So at Sky Sports David on Twitter.
David Garrido, thank you so much for joining me and doing this, and I wish you all the best, my friend, and hope we can do this again soon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Count me in. Thank you, Kiyan.